What does a post-layoff world look like to you? Today is February something, 2023, and I'm in the middle of my avocado grove. In fact, I just saw this guy here. I thought we were all done with these. He must have fell off of this tree, this big, huge choquette avocado. I'll just stick this here. Remind me to come back and get that later. I was thinking about all the articles and stuff I'm reading about layoffs that are going on. Like I said, it's February 2023. And in the last, 4, 5, 6 months, maybe really the last 90 days, there have been a ton of layoffs. And I thought, instead of making a video about my tropical fruit, or sometimes I do talk about my transition from the corporate world into running a small farm, I thought today maybe I could give you some insights into how to survive a layoff. And as a vice president in one of the world's largest corporations, I've been on both sides of the layoff. I've been the guy doing the laying off. And I've also been laid off myself. In fact, it was a layoff that got me out of the corporate world in 2015. Being on the receiving end of a layoff, being the guy getting laid off, wasn't that big a deal for me because I had kind of a soft landing. Because I had already purchased this farm. I had already anticipated that my exit from the corporate world would be through a layoff. And I transitioned rather smoothly. So as we take this afternoon stroll through my avocado grove, look, I got this beautiful Donny tree I planted last year, Donny avocado tree. As we take a stroll through my grove, I thought I would share with you the 4 things you need to keep in mind so that you will be able to survive a layoff. Number 1, you're gonna get laid off. Number 2, loyalty has an expiration date. Number 3, the only thing your employer owes you is what's documented in your employee agreement. And number 4, the better plan you have for when you get laid off, the smoother your transition will be. Let's talk about number 1. You are going to get laid off. I'm not referencing a study. I don't have any Bureau of Labor statistics on that. All I have are my own eyes and ears. And everybody I know gets laid off. Almost nobody makes it to retirement. Almost nobody proactively says, I'm going to quit and go and do something else. So if you don't believe me that someday you're going to get laid off, just look around you. Step outside your office, look down the hall. If maybe you're a work from home employee, think of the phone calls you get and the people telling you they've been laid off. It's going to happen. Know that. Embrace that. Be okay with it. It's the world we live in. Look at me. I'm an avocado farmer, right? I need big, mature trees like this guy behind me. It would be insane for me to tell myself that my trees aren't eventually going to get sick and die like this guy here, right? If I just went around thinking, oh, I'm going to be fine. I don't have to expect my trees are going to get sick. I don't expect my trees are going to die. When they get sick and die, what the heck am I going to do? I got to be ready for them to get sick and die so I could plant new ones. So I don't care who you are. I don't care what your job is. I don't care how important you think you are to the corporation. You're as likely to get laid off as anyone else. I went through the tech boom in year 2000. I went through the credit crunch in 2008, whenever that was. Oh, look at this beautiful mango tree right here. Oh, this thing is gorgeous. Look at the flowers coming off of this guy. Ah. But when we had that tech boom and crash in 2000, when the boom happened, people were getting hired like crazy. It was awesome. It was all parties and celebrations and, intercoastal cruises for Christmas parties and stuff like that. And then times got tough and the layoffs started, and it's so-and-so down the hall, and you have a little happy hour for her and you help her carry her boxes to the car, give her a shoulder to cry on. It got so bad that we just dedicated the last Friday of each month for a cocktail hour, for a happy hour, to say goodbye to the people who got laid off that particular month. And at one such cocktail hour, I was standing around with a bunch of people, and they were kind of conspiring, and they're like, hey, Tom, look around. Who do you think's going to be next month? And I said to her, Deb, what makes you think it ain't going to be us? And Deb was like, oh no, they can't live without us. They need us, blah, 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 blah. Well, guess who I was saying goodbye to a month later, the last Friday of the subsequent month? Deb. Deb did not believe that she was someone who could potentially be laid off. She thought she was too important to the company. She thought she was too integral to the functioning of the company. Within 4 weeks, she was gone. Think about it. Think about all the rock stars, you know, all the people in high leadership positions, right? People with the keys to the castle. When the accountants come out with that red pen and start striking lines through people's names, they don't think about that. They just think about saving money. This tree here is called a sapodilla. I mentioned to you it's February. This delicious fruit comes in the month of February. It's got a little bit of sap that pours out of it when we pick it. I love these things. I'll come out and pick more later. So that was principle number one regarding layoffs. A layoff is gonna happen to you. Come on, we'll go check on my bananas and we'll talk about principle number two. And I can't remember the order I gave them in, but I think principle number two, I told you, was that loyalty has an expiration date. So like I said in number one, a layoff can happen to anyone. A layoff will happen to anyone. Statistically speaking, if you're in the corporate world, the way you're going to make a job change will most likely be due to a layoff. And one of the reasons people think they can't be laid off, one of the reasons people think they won't be laid off, look at these beautiful, this is called a Namwa banana. I got this bunch coming in, and I got a brand new bunch just started for me a couple days ago. Look at that sucker. Oh man, that's beautiful. Then I got my blue Java right here, right next to it. These things, when they get big, they kind of, in the morning when they get a little bit of dew on them, they start to take on a bluish hue. They taste so good. Oof. But I was talking about loyalty, right? So people think, one of the reasons people think to themselves that they're not going to be laid off is because they've been very loyal to the company and they think they've got people in leadership positions that are loyal to them. And they're right. Loyalty is not an illusion. Loyalty is real. We live in a world with, who was it? A Hannibal Lecter talked about quid pro quo, right? I do something for you, you do something for me. We kind of form a bond. We develop a loyalty to each other. But when it comes to self-preservation, loyalty falls apart really, really quick. I don't know if you ever studied Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Maslow's hierarchy of needs is a triangle. And on the top is self-actualization. On the bottom is basic survival needs. And in between are layers, somewhere between basic survival needs and self-actualization. So if you and I are at a city council meeting where they're naming the new wing of the local library after you, in thanks for a lifetime of contributions to the community, I'm sitting next to you, you're very unlikely to turn to me and gouge my eyeballs out, right? That would be ridiculous. And that's because you're at the top of the pyramid. You're at the top of the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? On the other hand, if you and I were in a swimming pool and I took your head and dunked it under and got on your shoulders and was holding you under the water, eventually, in about 30, 40, 50 seconds, you'd be willing to gouge my eyeballs out so that you can get your next breath. It is the same in the job world. The lower down Maslow's hierarchy of needs a human being finds themselves, the more threatened their survival is. The more willing they are to do things that will ensure their survival. And oftentimes that means violating loyalty. Check out these Brazilian pygmies. I got a nice bunch of bananas going here too. I don't know, I'll try and show them to you. Gorgeous. This is like a little, oh, and there's another bunch coming out right here. We got another bunch starting right here. So here's what I'm talking about. That boss you did all those favors for, that person who tells you all the time, oh, I wish I had 5 more people just like you, Bob. When his bosses say to him, you got to reduce, ooh, look at these vines. I got to pick these vines off the tree. When his bosses say to him, you got to reduce your salary budget by 25% or you're fired, that means he's got to pick about a quarter of his people and he's going to send home without a job. That's people that when he needed your help, he called you and you came in, and when he needed you to stay late, you stayed late. when so-and-so got into a car accident and couldn't make that trip to Chicago, they put you on a plane instead and you missed your kid's soccer championship game for him. If he's been told by his bosses that he's got to lay you off, and if he doesn't, he's fired, you're gone. Now, if you're at a point where you are starting to get playful with the idea that layoffs are inevitable, that it can happen to you, that it probably will happen to you, you're also beginning to understand that loyalty isn't exactly as strong a force as you thought it was. We're ready to talk about concept number 3, which is the only thing your employer owes you is what's defined in your employment agreement, your employment contract. What I have viewed over the years is that people put a way too much expectation on their employers. Look at this. This is called a Simmons avocado. This is my first variety of avocado to harvest. This avocado, we pick it in the month of June. This one right here next to it, for example, is a Monroe. We don't pick those till November. This guy here, we pick him in June, and look, he's already putting out these beautiful flowers, and I think I saw an avocado was started up there. Might have blown down, but it was already starting to put out some little fruit too. I think I have a picture of it. I'll show you that picture. But anyway, I think people let their guard down and they begin to view their employer as some kind of, what would you call it, a benevolent entity, right? And that the employer, and maybe the employer will do this from time to time, should give concessions and understand your situation and maybe focus on work-life balance and all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, you owe them a day's worth of work and they owe you a day's worth of pay. And that pay might come in the form of actual money in a paycheck, benefits like healthcare benefits, stuff like that, time off, for vacation and paid sick leave. And there might be other benefits. And the only thing you should expect from your employer, and the only thing you will be able to win in a fight to get from your employer, is what's outlined in your employment contract. And like most contracts people sign these days, it's a lot of pages with a lot of words, and they put it in front of you and say, well, everybody signs this, and you sign it too with no understanding, and you go on about your life. Well, if there's one document you should really take the time to understand, maybe even pay a lawyer, pay $500 or $1,000 and sit down with them, it's your employment agreement. Your employment agreement tells you exactly what your employer is obligated to do. So if there is a layoff, and like I said, there will be, your severance package, oh, here's another little avocado. Your severance package will be laid out in your employment agreement. And if your employment agreement says in the event of a layoff, employee will be paid 2 weeks' salary, then that's all you're going to get, unless they offer you more for some reason. But you ain't going to win a fight for more, or unless there's some kind of state law or something. They're at least required to meet the minimum requirements of the law, right? But whatever you have in your employment agreement is what you can expect. Your employer ain't your mom, your employer ain't your grandma, your employer ain't your cool uncle. Your employer is an entity whose sole purpose is to make money. And one of the ways they go about making money is using your time, effort, and knowledge to make that money. And that's what they're paying you for. And that is outlined in your employment agreement. I worked for a company. I signed an employment agreement in 1993. In 1996, they asked me to sign a new one. I said no. Just about everybody else around me signed the new employment agreement. They just thought they had to. I refused because I was giving up stuff in the second employment agreement. The 1993 employment agreement was better than the 1996 employment agreement. And then when technology kicked in and HR systems starting to be more the norm, every year they would send us an email that we had to sign our employment agreement. They would change our employment agreement annually and give you a little button, click here to accept. And guess who would not click that button? Me. And they never said anything to me because I was not obligated to click that button. I already had an employment agreement with my employer. It was dated May 22nd, May 23rd, 1993. And I refused to update it. Set that guy down. And I mentioned it to my boss one time. I go, Jeff, do they ever say anything to you about the fact that I don't sign this employment agreement? He goes, what do you mean? I go, well, every year they make us sign our employment agreements over again, and I don't do it. He's like, oh, he says, I'm going to stop doing it too. And sure enough, in 2015, when they came knocking to lay me off, and they thought they were going to give me the base amount that was in the updated employment agreement, I went to them and said, no, you all need to take a look at my employment agreement, not your stock employment agreement that's on the shelf that you think every employee signed. You got to look at mine that goes all the way back to 1993. It goes all the way back to the early days of the tech boom. It was very beneficial to me. And they had to pay me a much higher severance than everyone else who signed the newer employment agreement. They had to pay me a much higher severance than what they would have had I signed the old employment agreement. They were not too happy about it. But I was not too happy about the way they tried to be sneaky and just be like, oh, this is just an annual thing we do. Sign away your rights right here. Nah. So know that you're going to get laid off. Know that your company and the people around you's loyalty is not as strong as you think it is. And understand and fight for your employment agreement. Try to get good things. Try to get things that are beneficial for you in that employment agreement. And like I say, if there's one document you should understand, it's your employment agreement. And if you can do all those things, if you know a layoff is coming someday, and you're not surprised when the guy you thought should be loyal to you isn't, and you get that email, and they tell you you're getting 3 weeks severance, and they're only going to cover COBRA for X amount of months and blah, 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 but you understand your employment agreement, and you've negotiated better terms in there, and you go back and you actually get a better severance worked out, you're still going to need a plan. Now we're standing right in the middle of my plan here, right? My plan was to become a tropical fruit farmer. And that's what I did. I was already ready to go. I was basically waiting because I knew no one gets out of this alive. And I had a plan in writing. And when I say have a plan, I don't mean like have a goal or have something you'd like to do. Like, oh, if I ever get laid off, I'm going to open a bakery. No. I mean, have a written plan. Like, what are you going to do the first hour when you get the email? Who are the people you are going to call? Do you have a lawyer handy to help you out with this? Do you have advisors in your life that are going to help you walk through this separation? What do you do the first hour? What do you do the rest of the first day? What do you do the second day? What do you do on Monday of the following week? What does a post-layoff world look like to you? Because it's a Wednesday. Today happens to be a Wednesday. It's a Wednesday, and as far as you were concerned, you were going to finish out your workday today, and then you were going to come back to this office tomorrow, and you were going to come back to this office Friday, and you're going to come back to this office next Monday, but it's 11 a.m., and you just got an email. You no longer work here, and security's coming to escort you to your car. You're going to sit in your car and cry, maybe, right? You're going to be shocked. Play it through in your head. Who do you call first? What does that phone call look like? What are you going to talk about? Where do you go next? How do you spend the rest of that day? Heck, maybe part of your plan is, you know what? You go home and crack open a bottle of wine and you just take 2 weeks off and don't think about it. But then on day 1 of week 3, you got a plan of action in place. Maybe if you're so inclined, you're already talking to another employer about a job, which is a great career tip, by the way. You should always have a plan B. You should always have some stuff developing, right? Maybe you're in the process of things with another employer. Well, you get your ass on that phone within an hour and you get a hold of that person and you start locking up that job if you want it. Because when a layoff happens, you're not the only one. You're one of a few hundred. You're one of a few thousand. And guess what? Every employer in your industry, every employer in your area, phone is going to be ringing. You got to get there first. Well, how awesome is it if you have a plan, but all your competition doesn't? Now, you just lost your job. You don't have a new job yet. You were planning to go to Disney for 2 weeks in 3 months. You need to know ahead of time. Are you still going to go through with non-essential plans? Or have you thought through the messaging and you're going to tell your kids, you know what, mommy and daddy were taking you to Disney for your birthday in October, but mommy just lost her job. And we're going to have to postpone that trip to another time. That's got to be part of your plan, right? Maybe there's clubs you're a part of. There's things you participate in that cost money. Maybe you're going to back off on those until you reestablish an income. It's going to be a lot easier to do all that if you've thought it through already, if you've dry run it in your head. Now look, this is a Monroe tree, and he's just starting to flower now too. See these little flowers? They were just little buds yesterday, but it's starting to open up. In the next couple days, these will open up. There'll be beautiful flowers, and I'll have honeybees all over here pollinating my grove. When I was younger, I used to race bicycles. Oh, here's another avocado. And racing bicycles, they're not cheap. Actually, they're a lot more expensive now. Back then, they were maybe $5,000. And you sign up for a race, you crash in one of them big pileups like you see in the Tour de France. Your bike gets busted. I mean, the wheels alone are $2,000, and the spokes are everywhere, right? And we had this saying, you'd be laying on the ground and all cut up and bleeding, and someone would come up to you, how are you? And you'd look up and say, that's bike racing. Well, it's the same in the corporate world. Layoffs happen. It's part of what you signed up for when you took your career in that direction. And if you signed up for a job, you don't understand your employment agreement, and you think the people that are loyal to you and the people that you're loyal to will maintain that loyalty in perpetuity, and you didn't fight for beneficial things in your employment agreement, maybe you don't even understand your employment agreement, and as a result, you don't know what the heck you're going to do when you get that phone call, that face-to-face conversation, that email informing you you're going to be laid off, then you're asking for trouble. On the other hand, if you know you're in an environment where the end game is you getting laid off, you know the people that you think have your back ain't going to have your back, and you understand what your company is obligated to do, and you don't waste your time fighting for stuff they're not obligated to do, now you can focus on that plan you have in place, because you got a plan in place, right? And you know what you're going to do the first minutes, the first hour, the rest of the first day, the second day, the first day of the next week, and what you're going to want to do that first month, that first 90 days, even that first year. It's going to come a lot easier to you. So I'd like to say, I hope you never find yourself in this position. But it's February 2023. If you're a tech worker, if you're a corporate worker of some type, you're probably going to face a layoff someday. So instead of telling you, I hope it never happens to you, I'm going to tell you, I hope when it does, you're ready for it, you're prepped for it, you can take it in stride. One of the things a lot of people find comforting during difficult times is eating foods they like. One of the foods a lot of people like are avocados. And you can get yourself an 8-pound box of avocados at guacfarm.com. GUACFARM.com. Thank you for spending my lunch break with me. I got to get back to the second half of my job. These mango trees all need to be sprayed. Look at all the beautiful, beautiful flowers on that tree. So while I get back to work, you go to guacfarm.com, and I will see you on the next video.